Humans burning fossil fuels has resulted in more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is warming the planet. To stop the warming, the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has to stop rising. The obvious way to do that is to stop emitting them, but that's easier said than done. For some industries, such as aviation and manufacturing, eliminating emissions is really hard. In the years leading up to the Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009, scientists realized something. It wasn't possible to cut emissions fast and thoroughly enough to meet the temperature targets that policymakers wanted. What was needed was to actively remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere too. People began to talk about a world in which greenhouse gas emissions and greenhouse gas removals balanced each other out, so that the overall effect was net zero. The countries that signed up to the Paris Agreement pledged to turn this idea into reality by agreeing to balance their emissions and removal of greenhouse gases in the second half of the century. Today, governmental net zero pledges cover over 2/3 of the global economy. America and the EU are working towards a target of net zero by 2050. And President Xi of China, the world's largest emitter, has pledged to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060.
To achieve net zero emissions, we need to do two things. One, which is more obvious, is to cut our output of greenhouse gas emissions from things like burning fossil fuels. But the other is actually to take emissions out of the air. And that's the harder and sometimes more obscure aspect of getting to net zero.
This is known as negative emissions, and the scale on which they might be required is one reason that net zero targets will be hard to achieve.
We'll need to go from a world economy that pumps out on the order of 40 billion tons of CO2 a year to one that sucks down, that is, removes billions of tons per year in the future to get to that net zero future.
How much greenhouse gas needs to be removed from the atmosphere will depend on how much emissions can be cut.